We all love to create software products, but at some point, we have to come to the challenging moment of pricing those products to our customers. So let's talk today about the different ways of pricing your product and what are their pros and their cons. So I did a poll recently asking what type of video you would like me to create in the future. This was one of the types that was most voted. If you want to give your input in the type of videos that I'm going to be creating in the future, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let's get going. The first one is the flat rate model. This is the most common way of pricing products. You probably are familiar with it even if you have not heard the actual term. This is usually how you pay for things. You just pay one time, pay an amount of money, the product is yours. Then usually you own the product. This is meant for products that once you pay them, you own the product. This is a very easy way of pricing your products, and it's a model that most of the people are familiar with and they are going to understand fairly well. The pros of this one is that, as I say, people are familiar with this. Usually what you do with products is that you have a product, microphone, I buy it, pay for it, I own it. It's my microphone now. This is a very simple transaction. That's a very easy way to price your product. That's why this is very simple to explain to your potential customers. Maybe the problem of this one is that people might not understand sometimes that there are hidden fees in a way, that there might be maintenance fees. And this happens very much with software products. When you have software products, usually they're going to be changing over time. There are going to be new versions. What happens then? Usually when you do just one lump sum payment, you don't get access to those new versions of the product. But this is something that many people or many companies solve by adding maintenance plans. These maintenance plans allow you to then get new versions and also support for that product, for the usage of that product. What are the benefits of this one and who is it suitable for? You typically get the money upfront. This is something that obviously many companies like because you get the most of the lump sum of the revenue first. And this is a very important thing for them because they can recognize that revenue, they can report it, it looks like they are growing. As in all the prices and then probably all the models, finding the right price might be difficult, but then again, when you do it this way, it's difficult then to update. If you don't get the right price and you sell a lot, you might be losing on the money, and the other way around as well. This is a way of pricing products that is still very much used, and you can see this in games. Many games still are sold this way. You purchase the product, the game in this case, as a digital or physical version of the product, it doesn't matter, and you own the product. So once you own it, it's yours, you can pretty much do with it what you want. And I had to say that this model is making a comeback in B2B products. At some point, everybody in B2B wanted to go into subscription, and it still is going on, this transition. But there are some new startups that are actually pricing their products with a flat rate. And I think that the reason is that many companies don't like subscription-based models. And for them, these are recurring costs that they don't want to address or how to address. So there is some kind of comeback of the flat rate for B2B products. And now let's go through the subscription-based pricing models. There are going to be several of them, so I will cover each one of them. But they all have a commonality. And usually what happens is that you, as a user, when you purchase that product or as a customer, you don't own the product. The product is owned by the company and they're giving you the right to use it as a service. It's this software as a service model, this cloud model that we see all the time. So SaaS products and all these things, you really don't own the product because the company that produces that product is still running that product on their own premises. And they're still having costs associated to run that product. And that's one of the reasons why you technically don't own the license. And then the company that is producing the product is the one that is usually owning the actual software. They're giving you the right to use it. And as much as they're giving you the right to use it, they can also take away the right not to use it. So if you stop your payments or fail to do your payments several times, you might lose your access to that product. This is a model that many companies like to use because there's something that they can sell then to their investors, to their boards, which is recurring revenue. This is a very popular term and something that many companies are looking or many boards are looking after, many investors are looking after. This is a way for you to have a pool of customers that recurrently are paying you for the usage of your product. Of course, they can churn. That's a different problem, something that you have to pay attention to as well. So now let's go through all the different models that are subscription-based. The first one is probably one of the most common ones, is pay per user. So how this is going to work is that usually you pay per user or per seat. There might be a slight difference. Sometimes you have to pay per name user and sometimes you pay just for a seat. So you just buy a seat where different people can sit in that seat. There are differences. Obviously, some of them are more prone to be abused because if you just buy seats, you could be switching the users that are using that seat manually, but that's a lot of work and most of the companies are not going to be bothering to do that. Some will do. You have to pay attention to that if they're abusing the system or the way that you're pricing your model. Of course, when you have a price per user, you usually have also, in a way, a tier of the number of users. And usually what happens is that the more seats or the more users that you're paying for, the less is going to be the price per user. And it's a good practice to set up some kind of calculator that is going to help your users understand how much they are going to be paying depending on the number of users. So what are the pros of this model is that it's fairly easy to understand. So if you need 10 people using the product, you just pay for those 10 people and you pay an amount of money per month and that's it. The con side is that this one can be easily unfair to the customers, to your customers. I've seen it with several companies and several products that they actually make you pay per user, but then in reality, you don't need everybody to be a contributor within that product. And you also need some people just to be a viewer every now and then. Sometimes even rarely, like maybe once a month or once a week to go and check out something in that product. And that kind of creates this imbalance of the people that are creating information and the people that are consuming information. This happens, for example, easily with Miro and Notion, where they have this price per user usually. And what happens is that you really want to make sure that your price is not unfairly priced for them. This is my opinion, obviously. Companies might do whatever they want. That's a different story. But it's very important that from the point of view of your customer is that I'm not overpaying because I might need, let's say, 50 people to be contributing to Notion. But maybe there's 200 or several hundred people that actually have to go and find information of what those people are creating Notion. So for example, I don't know, the roadmap, I want to visualize it there, or I want to go and check up Notion as a wiki, whatnot. Whatever there is that these people are not actively using it, and it can be quite unfair and the pricing can go quite high, quite fast. Some companies have solved this by just charging per contributor. The next pricing model is pay per feature. Usually you are not going to pay for just a single feature, although in some cases you will, but in most of the cases there's going to be like a bundle of features that are associated and that they are going to help you achieve something. So don't think that every single feature has to be charged separately. That would end up in a very complex situation for everybody. Where you can find this model, you can find it many times, for example, in companies that they don't charge for the base product, but then they charge you for extensions or plugins or things like that. This is a very common practice, for example, in Slack. Okay, Slack per se probably is not charging for those ones. It's the third party that is producing those extensions that you are paying to, but of course, Slack is getting a cut on those ones. And where you can see also this pay per feature quite commonly done is in cars. So cars, usually you pay for the base car, but then if you want to upgrade, you can get the next edition. I don't know how they are called, but then you can also add extras, and the extras are the features. The problem with this model is that some companies can get it right. Tesla, I think that, for example, gets this quite right. You can choose the interior and exterior color. You can choose the number of seats in the car in some of the cars. You can choose a couple of premium packages, but nothing very big. Usually, for example, autopilot and stuff like that. In other cars, if you go, for example, to BMW or other manufacturers, the amount of features or the amount of extras that you can pick are crazy, in my opinion. It's just too much. And even they kind of conflict with each other. If I pick this feature, then the model that I chose is the wrong one. It just doesn't support that one. I had to upgrade to the next one or lower to the other one. It's just very confusing. It's just going to confuse your customers. Just don't do it. Keep it simple if you do it feature-based. The pros for the pay per feature model is that you can get probably a fair price if you do it right, that you only had to pay for those extra features that are not part of the basic model of your product, the basic package of your product. If you do it right, you can get a good price for your customers, fair, that they're going to appreciate. The next one is the pay per usage model. Here, what you want to do is that you want that companies or your customers are paying for the usage of your product. And this can be measured in different ways. In some cases, it's just measured by computing size. This might be very difficult to explain to your customers, but this is, for example, what AWS is doing. When you are using AWS to provide you cloud computing, you're just paying for the amount of cloud computing that you're using. Very straightforward, especially if you're a software engineer and you know what you're doing. It's relatively easy to understand. You could also consider that pay per usage is something like you pay for the projects that you're using the product in. I've seen this kind of model. It might be a little bit difficult to implement because you have to understand the size of the project where they are using your product. But this is, for example, commonly done in some services, for example, for constructions or products for construction, where you see that, hey, there's a small projects like a house, a home, like a single unit, an apartment building might be a mid-sized project, industrial complex might be a large project, and there might be even larger projects like, I don't know, stadiums and so on, and bridges. They can get quite complex. So you can charge for the size of the project that you're using, somehow similar to the computing power that you are doing, that AWS is doing. So what are the pros of this pricing model? It's probably the most fair way of pricing your products. And this is great because you can really tell that to your customers. Most of the products are not going to be very fairly priced, and they are obviously going to be very beneficial in a way, especially software products and subscription model products are going to be very beneficial for the company or the business that is producing that product. I'm not saying that you should not do benefits, that's a different story, but in some cases it's a little bit abusive because you're paying for things that you're not using. In this one, you're going to pay for what you use. Great, and I think that this is a very fair way of doing it. The con is that you're going to have a really hard time to explain the pricing model to your potential customers. And in many cases, they're going to think that because it's a little bit of a black box, you might be overcharging them. But you had to do a good job. You had to explain it clearly. You had to make it very clear how you're doing it in a way that they also can monitor themselves. They can see how much they are using it and understand then how much they are going to be paying. Again, bringing calculators is going to help them understand the potential cost, because one of the things that many potential customers can freak out about is that they had no clue how much they are going to have to pay. And nobody wants to do that. You don't want to sign in for a service and not understanding how much ballpark this is going to cost me per month, for example. This is very important. You have to help them. You have to make it as much as possible clear for them to understand your pricing and how much they will be charged. Next is the tier pricing. The tier pricing is a very common way of pricing products nowadays. You can see it a lot, for example, in Notion. Notion has tiers, like usually they call them for like different types of teams. And what they do is that they provide different sets of functionality for the different tiers. You have the entry-level tier, like your small team, your mid-size company tier, your big-size company tier, and usually you have then the end tier, which is the enterprise tier. What you are going to have to do in these ones is that you set different types of feature sets for all these products, for all these tiers, sorry. So what are the pros of this model is that it's easy to understand. We see it in many products, we see it in many SaaS products, and people are used to do this kind of payment or pricing model. So this is a good thing for them. You're not going to make it very complicated for them to understand. What are the cons? Is that many times you see these tiers and they make no sense. So you have the team, like the small team tier, and then most of the things that you need are in one of the highest tiers, like not even in the next level tier, but 2 or 3 tiers higher than the one that probably you need, but then they put you that 1 or 2 features that you really need that are going to be in the next level. I understand why they do this, because probably they want you to go to the other tier, but in reality, then you are not kind of segmenting your companies or your users properly. The idea is that your tiers, ideally, you're kind of segmenting them according in a way to your different user personas or company personas, let's say, because usually you're targeting a whole team. But I would encourage you, if you take this tier approach, which I think is a good way of pricing your products as well, please look that what you are creating are tiers that really focus on solving the problems that your users have on those different categories that you define as tiers. And don't start adding features that you think that the first tier needs to the next tiers. Of course, it can be by mistake, but I see it way too many times that it doesn't necessarily feel like a mistake anymore. So the cons, I kind of already covered, but I think that the con is that in many cases you are not going to get the tiers right and your customers are going to be quite frustrated in the way that you are creating your tiers. Why this is wrong? Because they might go to your competitors and see that your competitors might be doing the tiers in a different way, and otherwise your products might be fairly similar. Maybe you have some advantages, but because your pricing is not done in a fair way, they will just go to your competitors. This will happen many times, so don't play too much with your customers, because potentially they will go and look into other competitors to see if they have a more fair way of pricing their products. So now let's go through some other considerations that you have to have when pricing or when defining your pricing models for your products. First of all, is that you don't want to go for a head-to-head competition, especially not with software products. You are not like in a commodity market type of environment that you had to go for pricing. So, but although in some cases you had to do that if your product is too much of a commodity, but most of the cases, most of us are going to be working in software products that are going to be or should be differentiated from their competitors. They had to have their unique value proposition. And this is what you want to use then to actually price your product in a fair way. The second one is that you're going to have things like trial or freemium. Sometimes people call freemium as a pricing model. For me, freemium as such is not a pricing model. Freemium and trial as such, they are actually part of the consideration phase. What you're doing is that you're giving your product for free, sometimes for a limited period of time, and sometimes just for the very basic part of your product. What you want to do with the freemium model is that you want to help your potential customers consider your product, try your product, see if it actually fits their needs, and then go and purchase the more valuable options. If you go for the freemium, I would be careful, because many companies end up being very frustrated about their free users, and then they start to think about how they can, start tightening what is available in the free and how they can transition people to the more premium features. I would be careful if you do this, because you might end up annoying your potential customers, and that's not probably the situation you want to be, because if you annoy those potential customers, most likely they're going to go to another alternative and you are out of the picture as a product. Another thing that you have to consider is that what are they going to be the payment plans? You have the different options that you will see. Typically for subscriptions, is it that you pay monthly or you pay yearly? Typically if you pay yearly, you get a discount because you have a whole year commitment. When you are in a monthly commitment, you might drop in the middle of the year, then the company loses half of the year revenue. It is better for the company usually when they can ensure that whole year. So that's why you get that kind of a kickback discount on the pricing. You have to also consider what kind of payment methods you're going to allow for your users. Typically, you're going to have different things like credit cards, invoicing, PayPal, Stripe. They're going to be many times dependent on the pricing model that you're using. And one final thing that I would like to say is that you don't have to think about one of these models as one thing on itself. Many times what happens is that they are a combination of them. So for example, you might pay per user, but you also pay per tier. This is very common practice. And different models can overlap with each other. So don't think that if you have pay per user, you cannot have tier base. You might combine both of them, the same with the features. So I would say that the most important thing is that you go and check how many popular companies are doing it, and also think about companies that you have done the payment process and that you have found it relatively easy to do that payment process. I would recommend you to go and research those companies and those products because you probably not have any struggles to understand how their tiers or the pricing model is set up and how the payment process is done. This can serve you also as inspiration of what you want to do. It's not necessarily copying, but it's a good inspiration for you to set up your own pricing models. And also pay attention to what are the common practices in your industry. Sometimes just doing something because the rest of the industry is doing it is not a good practice. It might be that all the customers are already annoyed with that way of doing it. So you have to understand also if customers are okay with that payment models or pricing models that they have at this point. So do your work, do your research, understand the current situation both from your competitors and also from the customers. This is going to again help you plan how you're going to do your own pricing model. So I have tried to cover the most common pricing models out there, especially for software products. There's other ones out there. So if you're using something different, or even if we are using one of these, comment below and let us know and share with us how you're doing the pricing for your products. Now we have been talking about how to do pricing for your products, but you have to have a proper product that solves the problems that your customers have. If you want to know more about how to create successful products, go check out this video. I will see you in the next one, and remember, stay safe.